This is going to be a super exciting video because I'm wearing cat ears, so what more do you need? Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be filming my Racing to Read book tag, which is a tag that was created by Ariel Bisset and Raylene LeMay, who are hosting the Reading Rush. The Reading Rush is happening right now. It's currently the 4th day of the Reading Rush. If you're not familiar with the Reading Rush, it's a yearly reading event that happens. It's very popular readathon on BookTube, and I will leave all the links to it down below, but it's happening right now, so by the time I'm gonna be posting this video it will be just over, but I would still highly recommend checking it out. This is my first year participating and I'm having a blast, so check it out for sure if you for some reason haven't heard of it, which I'm sure you have. But yeah, there are 8 questions in total in this tag and I'm gonna try to speed through them, and I already know all the answers to them, so let's go ahead and start with the questions. So the first prompt is warm up, a book that stretches your mind. And for this one I chose Never World Wake by Marisha Pessl. This is a book I read last year and I really enjoyed it, and the more time passes, the more I feel like retrospectively I like it. And this is a book about basically a group of teenagers who have been estranged but decide to gather for the first time after a long time after one of their friends died. And basically while they're in this remote house at a party in the middle of the night, this strange man shows up and he's like, you guys are now stuck in a time loop. No matter what you do, unless you decide for one person to survive and everyone else to sacrifice themselves, you will be stuck in this time loop. So this is basically kind of like a groundhog type of situation, and it's definitely weird and interesting in terms of the relationships of the people and what they're up to. You follow the perspective of one of the characters in this book, and because you only see the situation from her eyes, you don't really know what everyone is up to, so it really stretches your mind trying to understand what the situation is, what happened, why they ended up here, and what everyone else is trying to do, how everyone is trying to manipulate each other. I think it definitely stretches your mind, and I feel like I will definitely read this book and hopefully get more out of it than I did the first time around. Start line, a book that you started but never finished. I've mentioned in a previous video that there are many books that I have started and never finished, and not particularly because I wasn't interested. There were multiple reasons as to why I put some books down. And the book that I chose for this one is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This is a book that I read about 50% of, and I was enjoying it. There was nothing wrong with the book at all. I was listening to it on audiobook and I just put it down and never continued, and now I'm regretting it because the sequel just came out. And I have 2 friends who really like this book, so I feel like I really should read it because a lot of people seem to really like it. If you're not familiar with the plot of this book, it's basically about this girl who stumbles upon this weird statue one night and she decides to take this funny video with her friend and she posts it online, and she wakes up the next day to learn that the video has gone viral, and these statues basically have been popping up all around the globe and they're really weird. Nobody knows where they're from. They're not like an art installation or anything, and we're trying to figure out, are they alien? What is happening? Why? But another theme that is very heavy in this book is our protagonist dealing with this instant internet fame and all the repercussions that happen from her video going viral. And it sounds really interesting. I honestly don't know why I didn't continue reading this book, and I definitely want to once I get my hands on it. And I think I want to read it physically, so I might buy myself a copy at some point and read it physically, because I feel like the audiobook maybe just wasn't the way for me. But yeah, no hard feelings with that book whatsoever. So the next prompt is Sprint, a book that you read really quickly. And this book I read really quickly twice actually, and it's Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. This is one of my absolute favorite YA books. This is one of the few contemporaries that I really enjoy. And this is a book about Eliza who has an online comic that she produces on her own. She has a very large online following and a lot of people love her work. But because nobody knows her identity, it's kind of a tricky situation that she's in. And one day, this guy shows up in her high school who is one of the biggest fans of her work, and he's the most popular fan fiction writing for her comic series. and she knows who he is, but he doesn't know who she is. So yeah, weirdly enough, this book also has to do a lot with kind of internet following and the repercussions of having a large internet following. I love this book so much. Personally, I really related to the main character. She has anxiety, and the anxiety that's represented in this book is one of the best that I've ever read. This is my second favorite anxiety representation after Fangirl. So if you really are looking for a book that has really good anxiety representation, I would highly recommend this one. But yeah, basically I read this book really fast in one sitting. When I was basically off a shift, I used to work at the airport as a passenger services agent, so I was done my shift, but it was the middle of the night and I had this book with me. I had just bought it and I decided to sit down and read it, probably because I wasn't going home, either because I couldn't or because I had another shift in the morning. So instead of sleeping, I decided to sit down and read this book. And I remember I read this book from like 2 a.m. until 8 a.m. or something, and I remember just the light coming on and I was sitting in this airport cafeteria and all the people just passing by and I was just sitting there reading. And yeah, I would highly recommend it for everyone, to be honest. It's one of my favorites. Next prompt is Marathon. What's your favorite longest book? And for this one I chose Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This is a Russian classic book and it's one of my 2 favorite books of all time. Whenever somebody asks me what is my favorite book, I name this one and Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This book, however, is 671 pages, so I think it's fair to say that it's one of the longer books. There's construction outside of my window, so... But yeah, Crime and Punishment is 671 pages, so I think it's fair to say that it's a rather long book. I remember reading it during my summer vacation in Mexico, and I read it really fast. If you're not familiar, this book is basically about our main character, Raskolnikov. He commits a crime that ends up kind of having these repercussions. It's all about his life and how it intertwines with everyone else and how his act affects everyone around him and the moral repercussions of committing a crime and what it means to live with it. So it's very much a book about morality and it has a great cast of characters. This is one of those books that I think transcends time. So the next prompt is Hurdles. What is a book that had ups and downs? And for this one I chose A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. So this is the second book to the A Torch Against the Night series. So I love the first book so much. It's one of my favorite YA fantasy books of all time. But this book, when I read it, it had the same ups and downs kind of situation as the first book. This book is very plot driven and there's a lot of things that are happening that are shocking, and there's a lot of political intrigue, a lot of betrayal. There's a lot of dark themes explored in these books. There's a lot of death. This book specifically, I feel like it was very inconsistent compared to the first book that just kind of was going on the upward slope. This one was kind of like something exciting happened, then something not so exciting was happening for a while, then something exciting again, then something that I didn't really care about, and that was the whole book. I know a lot of people really love this book and the subsequent books in the series, but I, because of how this book was written, just don't know if I want to continue with the series. And if you're not familiar, this is basically a YA fantasy book that is kind of like Roman inspired, and it's set in this fantasy world where there's basically like a caste system. There's the oppressed people who are treated basically as slaves and they don't really have any free will, and they serve these people who are in power. And the people who are in power are very much a military kind of class. They have a lot of weapons and they train these people who are called masks, who basically prosecute others. They can hunt down slave class people and just do whatever they want. And in this book we follow 2 main characters. Guys, I'm telling you, the construction was not this loud at all this entire day, and once they started filming they just started doing some crazy stuff. I don't know what's happening. But yeah, our main character decides to join this kind of underground revolution to overthrow this military class who is oppressing everyone, and she decides to pose as a slave in this academy that trains these military masks. And the second perspective is from Elias, who is one of the top students in this military academy that Laia ends up being a slave in. That's all you really need to know. There's a lot of crazy things happening. I would say, I haven't read the Game of Thrones, but if I had to describe this book shortly, I would say this is Game of Thrones, but YA style. If you like a lot of depth and a lot of crazy political plots, recommend checking out this book. And especially because most people actually love these books much more than I loved the second one and what I've read of the third one. I think most people that read this really love it, so I would highly recommend still. The first book is amazing. So, Finish Line, a book you were proud to finish. So for this one I chose Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which is a classic that most people I think are familiar with. It's basically about a dystopian / utopian society where people are basically sectioned off into different caste-like systems. There's alphas, betas, gammas, deltas, and epsilons. And alphas are the ones that are like the most perfect ones, the healthiest, the prettiest, the ones that have, you know, full human capabilities. Betas are like a little bit lower, and epsilons are basically like quasi-humans that don't really have a lot of brain capacity. They're basically just like enslaved class that works for other classes. And so in this society, people are... And in this world, people are grown, they're not born naturally, and that's actually considered like horrible and crazy. And the only places where people are born naturally are like these fenced off, dangerous, labeled areas that, you know, nobody in the normal society can go in. And also the society is controlled by these pills that are getting handed out to keep everyone happy. So basically everyone is taking their happy little pill and, you know, everything is fine. And this is kind of how everyone basically enjoys their life. There is abundance, there's a lot of things that are created by the society to keep everyone just kind of like super happy, but it's all very fake and superficial. And this book is definitely written a little bit obscurely. There's a lot of more complex, hard language, I would say. When I was reading it, and especially because I was reading it in grade 12 after living in Canada for like 4 years, and I did feel proud because it was a somewhat hard book to read, but I definitely consider it one of my favorite classics. It's not one of my absolute favorite classics, but I definitely recommend people checking it out, especially if they want to familiarize themselves with the more original, classic, dystopian type of books. So yeah, I was proud to finish that one, and I really liked it. Gold medal. Best book you've read during a readathon. And for this one, I'm going with Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I've talked about this book before, but as a quick synopsis, this book follows Stevie, our protagonist, who is super interested in true crime. And basically Stevie gets accepted into this prestigious boarding school. And because Stevie is interested in true crime, she starts investigating a murder and a kidnapping that happened many years ago. And the things that are happening in the present are starting to mirror what happened in the past, and we do follow two timelines, what's happening now with Stevie and what was happening before, around the time that all these events took place. And yeah, it's the best book that I remember reading during a readathon. I recently read another one for the Reading Rush readathon that is happening right now, but you're gonna find out about that a little bit later. Participation Ribbon, an underrated book that you wish got more attention. So for this one, I decided to go with a book that I never hear anybody talk about, and it's a non-fiction. I'm talking about a non-fiction, who would have thought, but it's I'm Fine and Other Lines by Whitney Cummings. This is a memoir, self-help type of book. It's kind of ridiculous to say, but yeah, that's kind of what it is, by a comedian, Whitney Cummings. I'm actually not a huge fan of her as a comedian, but I really loved her book. I think I read the book at the exact right time, and it talked about a lot of things that I needed to hear at that point. It's basically a memoir where she just talks about a lot of the things that she's had to deal with living in LA and a lot of pressures, and kind of like the different anecdotes from her life, things that happened. There was one story, for example, about her dog and how her dog basically bit her ear off and she had to rush off to the ER. And there's different stories. There's also a lot of mental health talk in this book, and I definitely appreciated that. I needed to hear what she had to say, and I listened to it on audiobook, so she read her own book, and I would highly recommend it for people who are struggling maybe with mental health or their place in life, and they just really want to listen to a memoir or read a memoir from a comedian. I would highly recommend that one. I never see anyone talk about this one, but I think it's a book that is definitely worth giving a shot. But it won't be for everyone, but I don't think you need to be a fan of Whitney Cummings to read this book, because I certainly didn't know who she was. But the title, I'm Fine and Other Lies, really intrigued me, and yeah, I related to a lot of the things that she had to talk about, and it was just kind of like this little chat about a person who's lived longer and just has experienced more things, and they're talking about like how they got through them and what they've learned and the things they just kind of figured out along the way. So it was very nice. Would highly recommend this one. So yeah, that's it. That's the Racing to Read book tag for Reading Rush 2020. This video has been a mess to film. There has been so many sounds going on. I don't understand, but I guess that's just the story of my life. I really need to move out to like a place in the wilderness somewhere where there wouldn't be constant construction and kids screaming literally 24/7. I hope you guys enjoyed this video despite all of the noises that has been happening the entire time I was filming, and hopefully your reading rush is going well if you're participating, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!